When I started working in my 20s, I was never terrible with money, but I certainly wasn't operating at my best either. I'm currently reading Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and in it he talks about the 40% rule. The 40% rule is a concept where he suggests that when your mind tells you that you can't carry on, you've really only hit 40% of your potential, and you have so much more left to tap into. You're leaving 60% on the table. When I link that to my journey with finances, I can definitely see that I wasn't capitalizing on all the opportunities I had. And yes, it's a journey, and I'm definitely not at 100% yet. But today I'll share 5 money lessons that I wish I could go back and tell 20-year-old me to save me some grief. I can only imagine how much farther along I would have been if I had started applying these principles from the time I started working. Hi, my name is Rua, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm a chartered accountant with a real passion for all things personal finance and mindset in general, which is what I talk about on this channel. Jumping right into today's video, the first mistake I was making in my 20s was not thinking enough about retirement. When I started working, and at every job that I've had ever since, I've always been automatically enrolled into a pension scheme, which I believe is the same as a 401k in the US. At that point in my life, retirement felt so far away. It was very easy to ignore and not think about my workplace pension at all. It was just an automatic thing that happened, and I never paid any attention to it. Now I realized that I was not maximizing this opportunity. So my first mistake here was a mindset that said, retirement is so far away that I don't have to think about it now. What I should have realized is that retirement is so far away and the best time to start planning for it is now. The next mistake I made was not checking whether I was maximizing employer contributions. Most pensions work in a way that your employer will either partly or fully match your contributions into your pension fund up to a certain point. But because I wasn't paying attention to it, I didn't realize that I wasn't maximizing my own contributions into my pension fund, which also meant that I wasn't getting the most out of my employer. So at one job, I was contributing 4% of my salary to my pension, but my employer was willing to match my contributions up to 6%. Those employer contributions are free money that you don't have to work any harder for. There were hundreds of dollars in a year that I could have invested for my retirement, but I was just letting them go. That may not sound like much, but this graph illustrates what difference those small amounts can make over time by looking at 2 investors that start investing at the same time, but one gradually increases their contributions over time, creating a massive gap between the 2 at retirement. The final mistake, specific to my pension, was not understanding how my employer's pension worked. Some employers may offer a different choice of funds, or within a specific fund, you may be able to choose how your money is invested. Because I wasn't paying attention, I don't know if my money was invested the way that I would have wanted it to be based on my risk appetite, for example. Instead, it just got allocated to the default option within the fund. Now I make an effort to understand how my pension fund works, and I make any decisions I can in line with my investing preferences. The next lesson I want to talk about is living alone too soon. The first 3 years of my career, when I was still doing my articles, money was tight. Trainees don't get paid a lot. The money got better once you qualified and finished your 3-year training contract. I fell into the trap of assuming I could afford a lot as soon as I started working. That trap is easy to fall into, especially if you're in a career that will eventually be well paid. So I thought living alone in a nice 2-bedroom apartment was something I should be able to easily afford. But in reality, my training contract years were not the right time to be doing that. I really was living paycheck to paycheck because of that huge rent bill. I didn't have the luxury of just living at home when I started working either, because home was in Zimbabwe and I was in South Africa. I ended up sharing a place with my friend, which halved that huge rent cost and meant I could more comfortably make it through the month and start saving a little bit. In hindsight, I should have definitely started off in shared accommodation and not wasted all those months being broke because of that huge rent bill. The next lesson I want to talk about is to start investing early and not just relying on my pension being my only investment. Somehow I got it into my head that investing was something only rich people did. So I certainly didn't think I earned enough at the time to start investing in stocks. I was still very much in a mindset that in order to make money, I needed to work. I hadn't yet adopted the additional mindset of making the money I had already earned make more money for me. It took a conversation I was having with a colleague one day to make me realize just how wrong I was. He was talking about his investments, and I was thinking, investment? Don't we earn pretty much the same amount how do you have enough money to invest? This is one of the reasons why it's important to talk more about money than we do in current society, because that conversation led me to doing my own research about how much I needed to start investing. And I was shocked to realize that I could start with as little as the equivalent of $1 or £1. There's so many options out there and so much information available at our fingertips. So that's definitely research I should have done a lot sooner. The concept of compound interest or compound value is so powerful that Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. Compounding returns in investments mean that the money that you earn from your investments get added back into your investment so that in the future you earn even more money, not just on your original amount, but also on the earnings you've already made. Imagine planting a tree. Initially, you start with a single seed, which is your initial investment. As the tree grows, it produces more seeds, which are your returns, which can be planted to grow even more trees. Over time, you don't just have one tree, but an entire orchard growing and producing more seeds. This is similar to how compounding returns work. Your initial investment grows and helps to produce more wealth. Compounding takes time, which is why missing out on a few years of not investing may not feel like it will have a big impact. But similar to the pension graph, this graph shows the power of starting early. The blue line on the graph shows the impact when you invest the same amount as someone, but you start 10 years earlier. Assuming a similar 5% return, you can stop investing 10 years earlier than the other person, but end up with a lot more money by the time you're both 65. So now I love to invest in low-cost index funds, and I've done that for a few years. I'll probably talk about that in a separate video. Of course, all investing carries risks, so before you invest your money in anything, you should do as much research as you can and be comfortable with the risks you're taking. The next thing I would go back and tell my 20-year-old self is to spend more intentionally. Once I started earning some decent money, I was never bad with it, but I did do a lot of mindless spending. I didn't have any real responsibilities, so I didn't pay attention to how much I was spending on what categories of expenses. So, for example, I wouldn't really be mindful of how much I spent on clothes. Thankfully, I am now a recovered clothes shopping addict. Now I'm thinking what else I could have done with that money. Now I believe in outlining my goals and consciously spending on the things that mean the most to me in that season and being frugal on the things that are not a priority. This is a concept that Ramit Sethi talks about in his book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, where he advocates for the concept of spending extravagantly on the things you truly love and ruthlessly cutting costs on the other stuff. So while I like clothes, my primary focus in my 20s would have been on traveling. I would have cut back on other needless spending in my life and spent more visiting different places, or I would have just saved and invested more. The next lesson from my 20s that I'm now trying to rectify in my 30s is investing in myself. I feel like I gave so much of my 20s to studying because it took 7 years to qualify as a CA. So I always felt like I needed a break from studying something. In my head, studying something meant something like doing an MBA or getting a qualification like a chartered financial analyst. And I just didn't have the energy or deep desire at the time to do anything like that. I'd since shifted my thinking, and I realized that there are many more skills and different knowledge that I could invest that could be equally or even more financially rewarding than another formal qualification. I'm now actively looking for ways to invest in myself and spend money on improving areas that will ultimately lead to more ways of increasing my earnings. For example, if I had a job where I had to give presentations frequently and I'm not very good at it, I'm going to invest in that by spending money on a course that will help improve my presentation skills. In my 20s, I would have definitely thought, if I need training on something, then my employer should pay for it. But I now understand the value of working on and improving those critical skills in your career that will put you at the front of the queue for promotions or make you more marketable and able to go for a higher paying job elsewhere. I no longer see spending on these areas as a waste of money, but rather understand that investing in the right knowledge and skills will lead to a much greater return on my investment. I'll definitely share more on this in future videos as I continue down this path. That's not the full list of money lessons from my 20s. There are far too many for one video. But I would love for you to share any financial lessons you are learning or did learn in your 20s in the comments below. Thanks for watching.